Hello.
Hello. So,
Don't know when we're posting this, but just building. What deck are you building?
well, we just opened a booster box of Diagon Alley. I don't know what you can see from that angle.
I can see up to here. So.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See the box. Yes.
Anyways.
And the half-eaten
So,
strawberry behind it.
lovely.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. So, I am now went through all the cards I had extra rares of. Went through the commons and uncommons that I had. Most of them I had close to play sets. But a lot of them, a few not. And just looked at what kind of deck would be fun to build. So that's what I'm doing now, is I put together a deck list that I think would be good for experimenting with. Obviously, I'm still very new to the game, so I just used the basic 1/3 rule for land cards, which in this case is your lessons. I'm counting these almost as lessons, these new book cards, because they provide, and they only cost 2, but later you can use an action and discard them to draw 3 cards. So I've got a few of those in here as well. And that hopefully will make it more like I'm running 24 lessons instead of 20 in a 60 card deck, or 61 because you got your wizard. I decided for the wizard to go with Draco Malfoy. Once during each of your turns, so every single turn you can use his ability, when you use an action to play an item card, you get 1 more action. So anytime you play an item, you get a 3rd action that turn. That seems like a good deal to me. So I'm going to try that out. The books that I just showed count as items. There's also these things that we got plenty of. Was eel eyes and beetle eyes. I haven't tried much in the way of potions yet. I tried to throw a little into one of the Quidditch Cup decks, and we never really got to test it very much. But these each have a minor effect when it comes into play, either 4 damage to your opponent or look at your opponent's hand. And then if you have them both in play, you can use an action, get rid of them both, and go get a Bullseye Potion, which is a rare, but we happen to get 3 of them. So there's 1 in the set, and then we got 2 others that I can put in this deck. And this can do up to 13 damage to your opponent, which can be pretty sweet, I think. That seems like a big chunk of damage. So we're going to try these out. With the eyes to go and get them and make hopefully our deck run a little smoother. There was also a lot of owl themed stuff in this deck, and in general Care of Magical Creatures seems to be one of the more popular types because creatures are handy. They can do a lot of damage to your opponent just by sitting there. So I grabbed some tawny owls and screech owls and barn owls and just threw all those in. They're small creatures, but they are creatures. They've all got, they're 1/1, they cost 3, and then they've got an effect where you can either discard something, or when it comes into play, you can just go and get a discarded lesson back, or a non-healing card, or something like that. So it does seem like they'll be useful. I just don't know how much and if they're going to have enough value. But I figure this is a great time to test them out and try them out. So I put in 4 barn owls, 3 tawny owls, 2 screech owls, and 2 copies of Hedwig, because we had, again, extra Hedwigs. And we also had an extra Elop's Owl Emporium, which makes all your owls a little bit tougher and a little bit more damage. So
It looks a lot cooler when it's a foil.
it does. But in terms of gameplay,
It doesn't matter.
it should be handy.
Yeah.
So I've got that. I put in a couple of river trolls because I do want some creatures that hit a little harder. So these do 4 damage a turn instead of the owls 1 or 2 if you have Elops out. These do make you discard a lesson when they come into play, so I don't want to run a lot of them. And we also had an extra Hybridine Black Dragon.
I like that one.
So this will be the first time we get to try out a dragon in a Harry Potter deck. And 7 damage a turn is substantial. Mm-hmm. Well, no, I shouldn't say that because we had Norbert, didn't we?
I think so, actually, yeah.
So Norbert is definitely like a baby dragon. Pros and cons, you know. So basically, this deck that I've designed is, those are sort of the two main elements. You've got the owls with a few other bigger creatures for care magical creatures, and then you've got the beetle eyes and eel eyes leading into the Bulgeye potion. Then I just added a few extra things that looked interesting. Again, the item theme here works nicely with some of the owls and certainly with the potion stuff. But here's a dragonhide gloves, which will prevent damage to you from your opponent's creatures if they're playing creatures. So that's, I just figured throwing it in as a one-of to try out could be good too. Again, this is a very experimental sort of deck. I also put in 2 cauldron shops. So either player may use an action to search their deck and take an item card from his or her deck that needs potion power. So I could use this to go get my missing eye parts to go get my Bulgeye potion, which otherwise costs 10. But if I'm doing it this way, the most expensive component costs 5. So could be much easier to get a hold of. Or I could even, a potion power item, that also includes these books if I need more lesson power. So, then I put in a couple of these drafts. Spell to do 6 damage to your opponent, or choose one of his or her items in play and discard it. Seems reasonably useful, even if it does cost 7, sort of a late game item. And then I just threw in a selection of other sorts of potions and things. So, in this case, I threw in 2 healing potions, the Butterfly Weed Balm, 9 cards back, seems pretty strong. You do have to discard one of your potions lessons to do it, but it only costs 5, so could bail you out. I put it through in a Dogbane potion, do 3 damage to one of your opponent's creatures, could be handy, and a Mood Seed Poison, just another way to damage your opponent, basically. As a one-off, it costs 5 just to try out. Oh, sorry, it costs 8, that one. So a little more expensive side. Let's see, what else do I have here that I haven't already discussed? As I'm randomly sleeving cards as quickly as I can, trying to get this done. I discussed everything there. This pile. So another item for potions. We've got a healing item. Silver Unicorn Horn. When you play it for 6, you heal up to 2 cards back from your discard pile. And then you can use an action to discard it to heal back another 6 items. So a total of 8 items. Not quite as good at healing as those other potions. But again, it's an item. I figured it was worth a try. It plays nicely with Draco. Or should, I think, in theory. We'll try this out one day. Anyway, I think I've got all these sleeves, so now I just need to dig out my lessons for the deck. And like I say, one of my biggest concerns here, since I'm new to the game, is figuring out lesson ratios. And I think this deck might be a little bit low. But you never know until you try. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 care of magical creatures and potions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 potions lessons. Anyway, like I said, it's probably going to need tweaking. I'm a little leery that that's not enough lessons, but like I said, I've got the books to help out, so I'm hopeful that it should be at least functional to experiment with. I don't have too many cards that cost 8. I've got the 2 that cost 10, but like I said, I can get them into play using the other things that cost less. So again, I'm not too worried about that. And yeah, that's basically just my ideas for this new deck that's entirely built with cards from Diagon Alley. Now, previously, I built 2 decks entirely from the previous set, the Quidditch Cup. So I built a Quidditch Cup deck. I'm considering going back to it and seeing if I can tweak it by adding a few of the Quidditch Cup themed cards from Diagon Alley. There might be a few things in there that are useful. I also found a few other cards in here that might be useful to some of the other decks. So I may go back and tweak some of those other decks as well when it comes time to actually play with these. But this was my initial thoughts anyway for a Harry Potter deck based entirely around Diagon Alley, the set, which, like I said, we had good fun opening a box of. I'll just go through and look at show you some of the other options that I had to look at, particularly when it came to rares for deck building. Where did I put that? Alright, so we also had for some other interesting rares to consider. This is a Quidditch Cup one. A spell, choose a non-healing character in play other than the starting character. So this is only useful if your opponent's playing extra characters in their deck. And shuffle it into their deck. Pretty niche, but potentially useful. Gringotts, each player gets one more action on his or her turn. Seems like a strong effect, but it would also benefit your opponent. And I'll get something similar, hopefully, if I've got enough items from Malfoy here. So that was another option. Then we've got Flourish and Blots for Transfiguration. Either player may use an action and discard 2 of his or her lessons from play to draw 5 cards. Again, this is going to benefit both people.
Bring a little closer, you can't really see. That's better, yeah.
Then we had A Good Night's Sleep. I wish. Choose one of your characters in play that has a once per game ability, and you may have that you have already used, and to use that ability again. This could be strong in the right deck. It does cost 10, but yeah, it's definitely build around. We had an extra Malfoy. We also had Irma Prince. I considered whether Madame Irma Prince here might be good to build a deck around. We do have those books, which I showed you before, which I put in some. The Magical Drafts and Potions and Fantastic Beasts, Where to Find Them. There's a common book like this for every single lesson type. So we got lots of those to work with. The thing is, you may use an action to put a book card from your discard pile into your hand. That... I just don't know if books do enough to make that worthwhile. Because when you can sacrifice them and then you can use this to bring it back. But you're using an action to play the book. And then you're using an action to discard the book. And then you're using an action to get the book back with Irma. That's 3 actions, and your net goal is to draw 3 cards. You could have just used your 3 actions to draw 3 cards at that point. So, I just don't see how, unless there's other pieces to this combo that I'm not aware of, this doesn't seem to be worth building a deck around to me. Then we have Professor Quirrell. Oh, man. Once per game, you may return all creatures and items to their owner's hands. So there's one of those strong, potentially, once per game abilities. All creatures going back to their owner's hands and all items going back to their owner's hands. Yeah, that's a lot of action on the board, potentially. It could be quite good, but it's also very situational. And if I want to be using items, it's not a good match. And so it really depends on what type of deck you want to build, first of all, as to whether that might be a very strong card. He seems to me a really heavy spells-based deck, so probably more Transfiguration and Charms type deck would be where he'd fit better. And that's the extra rares I had. And then, of course, we had stacks of uncommons and things I did seriously consider. Here's a few cuts that I made recently. The Quintuped, 5-cost creature, deals 2 per turn, 5 health. It just didn't seem to do enough.
He's ugly.
It just didn't seem to do enough. I had another Moonseed Potion as an option. I had more Owls as options that got cut. I took out a Tawny and 2 Screech. I may tweak the witch owls are in there. I consider the boars. They only cost 2. They do 3 a turn. 5 health is decent. But to play this card, discard 2 of your... You would have to be in a very devoted Care of Magical Creatures deck that really has a way to make use of recycling your lessons or something. I just think that's way too steep a price to be playing in the early game. You'll hobble yourself. So those were a few of the cuts I made for things I briefly considered. And so yeah. So here we have a Care of Magical Creatures and Potions Diagon Alley deck for the Harry Potter TCG that just needs to finish being sleeved up and then given a bit of a distribute and a shuffle, and away we could go with it.
You gonna try it next weekend then?
I suppose we could have a bit more time.
Unless we change it up and just do it like tomorrow morning or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that might not be, I don't know how good timing that is for people.
One thing about this which irks me a little bit is that one of the 2 pre-con decks we had from base set did have Draco as your starting wizard. Now this is a different version of Draco with a very different ability. So there's that. But I do believe that that doesn't necessarily cause conflicts either. You cannot have 2 copies of a unique card in play normally. But there's an exception to that if both players have the same starting wizard. You can do that. It's just, as long as it's your starting wizard, if someone else is using the same one, fine. But other than that, if a character is in play, you can't play another copy. So, there we are.
There we go.
So there we go.
So, yeah. Are you building another deck to play this, or is this just going to go against one of the other ones?
I think we'll just try this against the other decks we've already built. And we have a selection of them now.
Yeah.
And we might tweak some of those other decks using some of the cards from this as well. Like I said, I think there's a few cards from Quidditch that might improve the Quidditch deck, or other ones that might benefit from other things too.
Alrighty. Well,
so maybe Quirrell would go nicely in one of our other decks, for example.
who knows?
So who knows? Anyway.
Alrighty.
So
well,
this is how I was working on my breaks and stuff at work. I took a little sandwich container and just stuffed all 4 of each, common and uncommon, up to 4 if we had less than that, whatever. And then my few rares. I didn't bring any lessons because I was just going to be bulky and figure that part out later. And I was deck building in my head on my breaks, and this is what I came up with. So there we are.
nice.
A little bit scattered here, but roughly 50-50 potions and Care of Magical Creatures.
I don't have the brain for deck building. I barely have the brain to play.
Well, it was interesting with this set because, you could argue that in the Quidditch Cup set, none of the other types, other than the new lesson type for Quidditch, really had enough support to do much of this with. But in this set, it's far more balanced. So with Quidditch Cup, there was definitely enough there to build a Quidditch deck, and then I was scrambling for other ideas.
Yeah.
But with this one, you had the definite theme for owls, with several cards supporting. You also had this bulge-eye potion and the 2 types of eyes. You had, item themes and stuff like that, and book themes, and there was a few different things to consider, and a few that seemed stronger than others.
It could be neat, actually, to play this deck against a updated Quidditch Cup deck.
Yeah. I'd be totally up for giving that a try.
Just take the, like you said, the extra.
I try to make it a little bit more general. So stuff like this, the Dog Bane Potion, I didn't include many. I just threw 1 in. But it's useless unless your opponent's playing creatures. So against the Quidditch deck, it would be useless. But almost, I think, every other deck that I've built, or that we've gotten in the pre-cons, and then I've edited,
Yeah.
Care of Magical Creatures seems huge. It seems like most decks have Care of Magical Creatures in them. So I think that's not too big for a one-of, just in case. Stuff like that. I have done that in some of the other decks as well. So we'll see. Anyhow, so that was sort of my thoughts in building a Harry Potter trading card game from, strictly, I should say, from the cards that came out of a Diagon Alley booster box. So, and like I said, last time I built 2 decks from strictly what came out of a Quidditch Cup booster box. So if you get a booster box of this set, of this game, as far as I can tell, from any set we've tried, it's possible to build at least what should be a functional deck. I don't know. Probably not competitive at all, but functional to try out the game.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it works for our purposes.
Yeah. And I think that's an important element as well. So we're experimenting, we're learning, and we're having fun with the Harry Potter trading card game. And I think it's just really well crafted in that design. If from that, no problem building a deck. With Quidditch Cup, I had a bit of a squeeze to get a second deck out, but I did it. And we also were able to complete both sets from opening 1 box each.
Yeah.
Like this one, it came down to the last pack for Quidditch Cup. In Diagon Alley, we did it with 2 packs to spare.
Yeah.
So, I'm impressed with the product in that regard. It's a shame that it didn't continue on beyond the first set for Chamber of Secrets, which is now getting impossible to find, sadly.
Is there any way that they could revive the game
expensive.
if they wanted to?
I don't know. You've got, obviously whoever's got the rights for Harry Potter would have a say. You've also got the game engine itself, which was designed by Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
Which is still around in a functioning company. But you definitely have multiple sort of stakeholders, right holders involved in that decision and how it was done and what would be required and all the rest. So it's interesting, whereas now they're done with the movies, and one of the reasons it got cancelled was because they didn't want to cause great confusion, because the look of the pictures, the art in this game has a bit of a different feel to it than the films, obviously. They didn't want that sort of brand confusion going on, was one of the reasons they discontinued it. But now they're recasting, they're redoing other sort of products with Harry Potter. Maybe it's not as big an issue anymore.
Maybe they could bring it back.
Maybe they could.
You just need enough people to maybe...
You've got fan sites that have made, sort of fan-themed sets to continue it on through some of the other earlier books. I don't think they've gotten... They might be about halfway through the book series now with their fan sets, but I haven't looked at them very closely, but I am aware that exists.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right.
So here's something to try on a future date. So you can look forward to that if you're interested. And if you're not interested, why are you watching?
Stop it. No, we want people to watch. We appreciate you.
Yes, thanks for watching.
Bye for now. See you soon.